Welcome back. You're watching our continuing coverage here on day one as we track the action and developments at Davos 2023. I'm Shereen Bhan, and joining me now on the program is Sean de Cleene. He's head future of foods at the World Economic Forum. Sean, thanks very much for joining us on a very cold day here in Davos. But you know, back in May, I remember every conversation was focused on food and what was happening with food and the food crisis on account of the supply chain disruptions because of the war with Russia and Ukraine. Things seem to have gotten better on that front. What does 2023 look like?
So it's true. I mean, the volatility of 2022 has calmed down a bit. We're seeing prices stabilise a little bit, and so it's not as extreme. But at the same time, if we're not vigilant, we have the challenge of sleepwalking, I would say, into the next food crisis. If you get a similar congruence of effects this year. I mean, I would say food inflation is probably one of the most talked about things, you know, by just at a consumer level across the world at the beginning of 2023. So even though it's calmed down a bit, the volatility is not as strong. The chance to really go into a full food crisis remains just as strong if we're not vigilant.
Absolutely, we do need to be vigilant, but what are you most concerned about today, and what gives you hope that perhaps the worst is behind us?
So in many ways, I mean, the food system has shown that it is resilient. And so what we're seeing is, in a way, shocks are the new norm, you could say. And resiliency is that remedy. And what I'm hopeful for is the fact that at a country level, we're taking we're paying much more attention to this idea of how do we become more resilient to these kinds of shocks. At the same time, we're also seeing the nexus of energy and fertiliser and food-related issues come together. And so if that's combined with some particularly bad weather in 2023, then we could have an even worse impact. And those food prices remaining high for the very vulnerable, this is catastrophic.
Absolutely. I mean, the cost of living crisis is something that the world needs to factor in. But, you know, let's talk about fertilizers, because you talked about the impact that that's having across governments and fiscal space at this point in time. What's the expectation on fertilizer prices for 2023? What do you hope?
I think we won't see the massive rises that we saw last year, but I think they'll still remain high. I think energy prices will remain high, fertiliser prices will remain high. And so this is really forcing countries to look at what does that mean. The challenge is we're moving from an access and affordability of food question to an availability of food. If farmers are not using fertiliser because it's too expensive, that means there'll be less crops grown. And whereas last year this was really an issue around wheat that impacted areas like North Africa, who imported a huge amount of wheat, if we see a major impact on fertiliser use in rice, say, for example, this and rice production is right down, combined with monsoon impacts that are stronger than normal, then you could have a huge impact on something like rice. And so countries are having to really adapt quite quickly. And that means having the data and the ability to manage in a very smart, adaptive way.
You know, speaking of adaptation, you talked about resiliency and what each country will need to do to ensure that there is resiliency as far as food supply is concerned. What is it that you're putting on the table here at the World Economic Forum, through the conversations at Davos, on what people need to do and what people need to focus on? What are the policy imperatives?
So we're seeing a shift from just looking at the race to net zero to also looking at the race to adaptation. And so we saw this as a big focus in COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, and with the damages and loss settlement that came out there. And so what we're seeing is, do we have the tools to really address this properly? And so we're looking at data in quite a big way. Can countries really develop much more sophisticated, open, shared data models that allow them to make smart decisions? Kenya, during the COVID and food crisis, for example, set up a food systems data war room where it was able to bring all of that data together. India is looking to really increase the use of data technology to improve the efficiency in food systems. And so countries are starting to realise innovation is going to be critical.
Speaking of innovation, and I want to understand from you the work that you're doing in India to try and sort of nurture innovation within agriculture and specifically food. Take us through the plans there.
I'm very excited about what's happening in India. India is now building a food innovation hub, trying to really create an ecosystem around all of the use of data. Similarly, countries like Vietnam and Kenya and Holland and Europe and Colombia are taking a similar approach. And so how do they build up very dynamic ecosystems that really harness that energy? That innovation at the country level, because the report that we're bringing out this year at Davos is really showing that you need to be able to get to the country level, where we've actually tracked 7 early mover countries, and going country by country to see what is needed to actually create these integrated food systems in a much smarter, more agile, resilient way.
And what will it take in terms of financing, this agility that you speak of?
And that's the danger. I mean, during a downturn like this, often the investment into something like innovation is put on the back burner, and you're concentrating on what you're focused on traditionally. But actually, if we're to really overcome this, we need to double down on that investment into innovation. So we're seeing in the run-up to COP28 this year, big focus on agricultural innovation missions for climate, looking at cascading in thousands of innovation sprints around the world, where they're looking to increase from 4 billion to 8 billion the amount of money that's going into innovation sprints globally. And that kind of focus is what we're going to need. So counterintuitive as it is, we actually need to be going harder and faster on innovation during a tough, challenging time like this, rather than saying, oh, this is something that we should be putting off to the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to end, Sean, by asking, you talked about some of the early movers and the countries that you're tracking in terms of what they're doing on the innovation side to try and build up resilience as far as food supply is concerned. In terms of innovation, what's looking most exciting to you at this point in time? There's been a lot of focus on trying to do more in terms of climate-resistant crop, for instance. What's looking most exciting to you there?
So countries like Vietnam are really trying to look at low-emission rice and do that at a nationwide level, and the kinds of innovations that would take to reduce the emissions significantly in rice. And other countries are looking at data and really harnessing data to make smarter, more informed, real-time decisions. Other countries are starting to look at their import and whether they can produce more locally, or innovations in plant-based meat and lab-cultured meat are really taking off in different parts of the world. And you're seeing some quite exciting innovations, particularly in heavy import-orientated areas like Dubai or Singapore, who are saying, actually, we really need to strengthen innovation in this respect.
And enough push there from the private sector?
I think the private sector is starting to get quite excited about food, in the sense of seeing that this could be a whole next opportunity and development area, but at the same time very cautious of the fact that this is a hugely complex and challenging thing. The food that ends up on our plate that we eat has such a complex value chain that actually making sure that we do that right across the value chain. This is a whole of society effect, so that farmers are actually reaping the benefit, and as much as consumers are also reaping the benefit is so important.
Let me end by asking you, since you said that we've seen an easing of volatility as well as prices and improvement as far as supply is concerned, do you believe that some of the measures, temporary measures that countries had brought in to resorted to export bans, etc., it is time now to unwind those?
I mean, what the difference between this crisis that we're in the last crisis was we didn't have such an impact of export bans, because that's really when those short-term restrictions come in at a global level, it really starts to destabilise the whole system. And so even though they were brought in, I think this year in the last year they were brought in a more measured way. And actually that's what we need to be able to see, is more adaptive, smarter, timely decisions where maybe you affect a decision at a national level for a very short period of time until you've gained the information to make the decisions that are right for a country. And that's what we need to see a lot more of, is smarter decision making, to using the right data, and to really make sure we're not creating a cascade effect across the system.
So what will be your big hope from Davos 2023?
Well, I hope that we can emerge wiser from what we're doing and really be able to implement a lot of the commitments that are made. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a large number of commitments being made, whether that's in climate smart commitments or regenerative farming or commitments to net zero. And now it's the time to move from innovation to implementation, from commitment to implementation.
Is downsliding a real threat?
No, I mean, I think where everyone actually realises that we need the eye on the prize for this one. We've got to take this full approach right across, right across the nature, environment, food aspect of it. And it's only going to be working together in quite a significant way that you actually create, you create the situation where it's a glass half full rather than a glass half empty.
Well, let's focus on what needs to be done and put the execution roadmap in play. Thanks very much, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here at the very start of Davos 2023.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, we are going to take a break, but don't go anywhere. Right after this, we'll be back with more conversation. Stay with us. You're watching our live coverage here from Davos. We're back in a minute.